Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and I'm speaking today with Corinne Zupko, who is the author of a book that's a complement to articles called From Anxiety to Love, which I just finished reading. Let's see if I can hold up and everybody see it here. About a week or so ago, and it's wonderful. So for someone new to A Course in Miracles, or for someone who's studied a long time, or anywhere in between, I recommend it highly. And it's very easy to get into, very accessible, and has a lot of great stuff in it. So, and I've known Corinne for a number of years. Corinne and Craig Villarubia and Danielle Scruton also are contributors to the Miracle Share Conference, which is happening again this October. And I'm happy to be contributing a little bit to that again this year. But anyway, why don't we start, Corinne, with some of your things, some of your background items that maybe people might not know about, because some people may not have seen other conversations with you, and maybe a little introduction to how the book came about, and then maybe some things that are unique that haven't been covered elsewhere. So
Yeah,
how's that
sure.
sound?
So thank you for having me, and thank you for such nice words. It really means a lot to me hearing that you love the book, because I know how involved and dedicated you are to A Course in Miracles. So it's really awesome to hear you say such nice things about it. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's a wonderful read. It's fun. It's a fun read, and it's very experiential. I love how you put a lot of exercises in there, and really encourage the interaction, and rather than just kind of this intellectual glossing over, but it's really, let's pay attention to what's going on in the mind and find out where things are that
That
can
need to come out to be
that,
healed. Yeah.
exactly. So
Like anxiety, which is with the title of the book, From Anxiety to Love, it's clearly about anxiety. But you mentioned that this can be a book for new course students, but also course students who've been studying for a long time. And I was actually really pleased and surprised and gladdened to hear that a number of folks who have experience with A Course in Miracles have reached out to me and said, Corinne, it's made connections for me that I didn't get before, and thank you. So I really, really am grateful for that. And it's been, A Course in Miracles has been everything to me in my recovery, because for anybody who hasn't seen any other talks or any other of my other videos just yet, my journey with anxiety has been lifelong. I had it as a very young child, as a kid, as an adolescent, as a young adult, as an adult. I had anxiety issues probably for, I don't even know, 3 decades, somewhere around there. And it was through discovering A Course in Miracles, actually through my mom, who wanted me to get into it because she thought it could help me. She knew I was an anxious kid. But being an adolescent, when your parent is trying to give you something, what do you do? But
exactly,
like,
exactly.
no. And so it wasn't until I was actually in college, this is back in the late 90s, when my mom offered me the book after I had my very first panic attack. And she was like, Corinne, I really think it can help you. It's all about finding peace that's already in you. And I said, bring it on. I'm happy to try anything that will help. And I had tried a lot. I was in therapy with many different therapists. I tried a lot of different approaches, and it was, my anxiety was so existential and really based on those big questions. Like the biggest one, the church that I used to go to, it was a Unity church. They had a very big sign on the back saying, God is love, which I love. But the question that I wrestled with was, well, if God's love, how can a loving God create things that die? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. There's nothing about death in any way, shape, or form that's loving. It just doesn't, it never made sense to me. And it also, this is going to sound really weird or not for people who study the course, but I also used to just get this really strong, palpable feeling that it's weird to be born and it's weird to die. Like, something about that just doesn't sit right. It just doesn't, it feels off. It just feels like, how can something be that wasn't before? Like, it just would trip me up. I'd really get caught on these questions. And so when my mom gave me a copy of the course, and again, this is 1997, January 1997, I opened it and I read those lines: nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And my logical mind was like, huh, I have no idea what this book is talking about. But that moment that I read those words, it was like a light went on in my heart. It was like something lit up in me that was like, yes, this is what I'm looking for. This is how you're going to find the answers that you need to resolve this inner turmoil that I felt like I had for so long. And although the anxiety was really existential, it also came out in very specific forms. So it came out through a lot of fears about getting sick, every little pang of pain. I mean, I can remember worrying obsessively when I was probably around 12 years old. I worried about a lot of things because I had an ulcer by the time I was 12. I remember worrying that every pain that I felt in my belly was going to be appendicitis. So I'd fixate on, physical symptoms, and I'd get myself totally freaked out that it meant the absolute worst. I'd go from, calm to like all out emergency like that. And so, the anxiety took very specific forms. And I know for people listening who might be able to relate to this, panic attacks are overwhelmingly terrifying. It's hard to find words to describe what they feel like because it's as if you're lost in the blackness of just overwhelming, intense, debilitating fear. My heart would race. I'd get sweaty. It felt like the world was just caving in on me. And I felt like I was going to die. Like I felt like that was going to be it in that moment. And so panic attacks are just so terrifying. But the crazy thing, I mean, is that, there's a statistic that 40 million Americans have anxiety disorders. So that's at the high end of the continuum that I just described with like panic attacks or the diagnosable generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, which were some of my diagnoses. But like if you go down the spectrum on the lower end of anxiety, we all know that. That's that inability to sit still. That's the I should have done this, I should have done that. I feel restless. I wake up and I feel anxious. We all know that. So we all get this, I mean, anxiety is applicable to every single one of us. And the funny thing too is that like the psychology field would say that fear is in response to something real and anxiety is in response to something imagined, which on one level I totally get. But the Course, as you know, takes this radical view that what is real cannot be threatened. Yeah. And what is not real is what we're experiencing here, is what, it's where all fear comes from, this belief in separation. So it's been through this journey of really diving into the Course and really exhuming and looking at all the fears in my mind, bringing them to the light, bringing them to the Holy Spirit, which in the book I refer to as your inner therapist, and healing on a deep level, where we start to fundamentally shift our identity from this small sense of self, Corinne, to at least more of an awareness. I get it in glimpses, I don't stay there all the time, but more of this sense of the interconnectedness, the oneness, ourselves in truth. And in that awareness, anxiety has to fall away. Perfect love casts out fear. If fear exists, there's not perfect love. It's just logical that the more we get to who we really are, those issues just have to fall away. They just have to fall away. So I feel like I just covered a whole lot in that whole story, but it's been quite a journey, and I'm really grateful to be here with you to be able to share, about the book with your audience, and hopefully to keep spreading the love.
Yeah, you really did cover a lot there. And one of the things that you started with, I think, is such a great point, is it's not just the clinically anxious that we're talking about here, because the whole idea that there's a separate self. I think you said a small sense of self. So I'm going to use that as another variation of the acronym I use for SSS, which is seemingly separate self. And
I love that.
And either way, whenever you slice and dice perfect oneness, there's anxiety involved, because we're cutting up what can't be divided, and we're basically trying to sever a perfection and an innocence and a oneness and a peace that is really our birthright and our heritage, but we've become so accustomed to it and so, second nature in our ego responses to things, unless we start beginning to question that we don't even, it's like a fish asking a fish about the ocean. What ocean? I mean, that's just the realm that the ego lives in. Is anxiety is the default. High anxiety is ego's default state, not a classic Mel Brooks film. Not just
Right.
anyway. But
I love that. I love that. And I love how you call it the seemingly separate self. And you're hitting it spot on, that trying to divide up oneness, innocence, something that cannot be divided, and then walking around on a day-to-day basis, having no memory of that, and, oblivious to this, what's happening, in our unconscious. Of course, anxiety has to come about. Of course it does. And so what is the remedy but to look very deeply and to be willing and to exhume all this for healing? So I love how you said that.
Yeah. And exhuming, I've had some interesting conversations with a mutual friend who I will go unnamed, but who's gone through a lot of things in the past year or so. And one of the things that we kind of realized is that you don't have to rent a backhoe. In your mind, metaphorically, to really figure out where your dark night of the soul stuff is. You can actually just kind of allow what comes up on a daily basis, moment to moment, really, as your forgiveness classroom, as your anxiety eradication classroom, and just notice where there's attention, where there's a feeling of specialness or a feeling of victimhood, or just the whole laundry list of what A Course in Miracles would call, ego thoughts, that can cover an enormous spectrum of things, but they're really all based in some fashion or another on a fundamental fear, which is the fear of coming face to face with a crime that we never committed. Ken Wapnick, who is my favorite teacher of A Course in Miracles, has a phrase that I really love, and he says that the ego is a maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem. And I think that really is such a great phrase, because it really describes, the cause of the anxiety that we have, which is really an adaptive solution that doesn't work, so it's maladaptive, but it's a solution that is presented as a way out of a problem that we made up. And again, that's where it's kind of a stretch, I think, for people who are new to the non-dual metaphysics of A Course in Miracles, that it suggests that the reality, since you mentioned reality a few minutes ago, that we usually think of as reality, the physical world with its space-time stuff and all the bodies and galaxies and everything from quarks to quasars and everything in between, is really just a giant holographic projection of an idea. And that's kind of a lot to wrap your head around, but I think the more we start looking at it, and that allows us to see with kind of a grain of salt or an inner smile that, maybe we don't have to take it quite so seriously. And that levity does wonders to dispel our anxious thoughts when we recognize that we're, as Shakespeare would say, making much ado out of nothing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love all that. And I really want to go back to what you said about how we don't have to rent the backhoe, because that's so important. That, the Course says you don't have to follow fear through all of its circuitous routes. When exactly. That, one core belief is healed, the rest goes with it. And so I think we can get so tripped up in thinking that, oh, I have so much work to do. There's so many fear thoughts, all this stuff. I have to look at each one. And you're absolutely right. Let your day be your classroom. Let your day be your training ground. I love how you said that. Look for those moments of that desire for specialness. Look at the fears that might come up, be willing as you go through your day. So that's really, really key, that we can get overwhelmed in thinking we have a lot of work to do, when really it's really just one belief that we think we've separated when we have not. And I agree with you that it can be challenging for new folks to wrap their head around this. But my guess for folks listening, that even if you're new, there's been enough that you've heard about this where maybe you're having that experience of something lighting up inside of you, even if your logical mind doesn't get it. So I love all of that. I love everything that you just said.
Well, it's mutual. Is there anything in particular? I underline a whole lot what going through your book, and I found a lot of things that were covered in a way that was kind of unique. That came at some of the real core ideas and fundamental principles in a way that was really unique.
Yeah,
Are there any phrases that you'd like to share? I mean, I can flip through and find some of the places I've underlined and
we can
speak
certainly
to
have fun
those.
opening the book at random and
Yeah.
seeing where spirit brings us. But
Okay.
I guess just the one initial thought that comes to mind with the term that I use is child mind, where I am describing the Son of God
Mhm.
as a child. As you know, I mean, perhaps this child is I want to say grown, of course. We can't fathom necessarily these non-duality concepts within duality. So my word of child is really, the offspring, the Son of God.
Uh-huh.
Um, and part of this child mind had this tiny mad idea that we'd be better off separate, we'd be better off special. And so part of it, goes to sleep and is dreaming this dream. And I just want to go back to what you said before about this world being a grand projection and a grand hologram. One of the big realizations that really helped me, because I was so wedded to fears about sickness and fears of body stuff, that a thought that came to me, and maybe this is even through a conversation with my mom. I credit my mom in the back of the book that much of her wisdom is just infused throughout the pages, because at this point, she and my stepdad are still both very dedicated students of the course, and we talk about it often. This thought that came to me or to her and then passed on to me was that my body is actually separate from me. It's actually a projection coming from this sleeping mind right now. And my fear was that my body had the power to end my life. And it doesn't, because I'm not it, because it's actually separate from me. So having this sort of aha moment, this sort of palpable realization of seeing how clearly, and this is where again in our daily lives we can just look at what's coming up and, oh gosh, I'm freaking out. I remember freaking out over, I think it was bird flu. Was that the H1N1
Mhm.
outbreak that we had years ago?
Right.
I remember freaking out about that. And it was probably around that time having this realization of like, wow, this fear is actually showing me that I really believe that I'm tied to this, that this is, all that I am, and that grand life in the, capital L life could be affected by what seemingly happens to this, projection. And so it was just a really nice aha moment for me to recognize that this actual, felt thing that I am walking around in is just a projection. I do want to add, because my eyes have also been open, because I've communicated with people about some of the course teachings who have been through a lot of trauma and been through a lot of difficulty, and found that a teaching like that was actually very dissociating, almost like it almost wasn't helpful to them. They almost were, it was almost a little bit too much, because they felt like they could so easily disassociate from their body, that where they were, they needed to be in their body and grounded in their body. And so I just want to throw that in there as a little disclaimer, that as we, really dive into some of this, we very much have made this real for ourselves. And so if you feel that you need to stay grounded by feeling your feet on the floor, and that these conversations bring you too much, removed, remember, we have to be where we're at. We absolutely have to be where we're at and be very kind to ourselves. So I just wanted to add that.
That's such an important point too, because there's nothing in the course about impatience. In fact, it suggests that infinite patience is really the way to get immediate results.
Mhm.
And to tie into what you're saying, I think it's another example of all the many forms of level confusion that it's so easy to get into when we kind of slip back into the ego propaganda of thinking that it has to be about fixing the dream, that there's nothing wrong at all with doing the things that we feel like we need to do on the level of form to take care of our bodies, to do the jobs that we do, to attend to our families and our communities and our, whatever civic and altruistic and those kind of activities that we find ourselves drawn to. There's nothing at all that talks about that in the Course in Miracles, and it's easy to think that it has to do with behavior, and including how we deal with our bodies. But just because we start noticing that there's another identity doesn't mean that we just have to go live in a cave or something. Or in fact, one of the key things in the Manual for Teachers that has meant a lot to me when I'm tempted to put my dream repair technician hat on, is in the back it says something about are changes required in the lives of course students and teachers? No. What it's really suggesting is that changes are required in the minds. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. I don't have to behave any different. I can just have an ever-growing inner smile that notices the surreality of the dream. So like last night, my wife and I were watching a movie about a hologram that is brought in to help this senior citizen cope with the end of life scenario, and then it gets into this virtual reality twist and turn kind of thing. But I was thinking, well, everything here is a virtual reality hologram that we've made up in order to try to achieve something in this world. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's just eventually we will tire of wanting to think that there's something here outside of us that we think is outside of us, including our own bodies, that is going to make us magically happy.
Right.
But there's nothing at all that suggests that we shouldn't do those things, all the magic rituals that we have, but just not to take them quite so seriously and have fun with it, in fact.
Yeah, you're bringing up a really important point, and I emphasize this throughout the book, and I facilitate a Sunday night Course in Miracles study group over the phone, where I'm constantly saying this also, that we have to be where we are. Mm-hmm. That if we say to ourselves, I should be further along than I am, or I shouldn't feel the need to take these vitamins, or I shouldn't, all that, we are trying to be somewhere else than where we are, enter a sense of strain, and that's not going to help us. That's actually really only fueling the ego's judgment. We're judging ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so the practice of allowing ourselves to be where we are, and this is one of the, steps, one of the tools that I talk about in the book, is huge because, for instance, I still take vitamins, and because I believe I need them.
Sure.
And so what I do, and actually somebody asked me this, I have this as a blog post on my website, which is FromAnxietyToLove.com. Somebody asked me, what's the point of eating healthy or taking vitamins if the world is an illusion? And I was like, that is a fabulous question. And my suggestion and what I do in my practice, and I also share about this in the book, is that I will take what I believe I need, because it's a belief in my mind, but I'll take it with the Holy Spirit. I'll literally say, I'm willing to look at my belief in the power of kale with you, Holy Spirit. And I don't do this every time. I don't always remember. And I might not do it in the moment. It might be later. And then I chomp down on it and I enjoy it. Or I take the vitamin and I take it with the Holy Spirit, trusting that if it's meant to fall away, if the ego stuff that's there, is ego stuff, number one, I might not be aware of it. I can trust that if I'm consciously choosing for the Holy Spirit in everything that I feel like I need to do, I can trust that the ego stuff's going to fall away the moment that I'm ready to let it go. And I can't tell you how many stories. There's somebody on my study group who shares an amazing story about how that's how, after smoking for years and years and years, one day it was like it just fell away. She just didn't need it, didn't want it, didn't do it anymore. And after however many, years of having been a smoker, poof, it just fell away. And that's the gentleness that I've experienced with the Course in Miracles, is that the only strain really for me has come in, obviously, with my own resistance to the material, but the strain for me has really just come in when I get into that thinking of, I should be doing this differently than I am. I should be further along than I am. If we're doing it, if we're allowing ourselves to be where we are, if we're giving it to the Holy Spirit, I have experienced a lot of gentleness in that, which has been a really, really beautiful thing to experience. And of course, there can be challenging times, and usually because of our resistance, but I like to really emphasize the gentleness of the healing process.
That's really important. Yeah, it says in there, don't fight yourself, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you notice the resistance is strong, just back off. And the beauty of it is it's inevitable that we will return to it, not necessarily in this particular form, but since it, as it says, it's just one example of an infinite, well, a large number, let's say, of variations on the universal curriculum. We're destined to come back to the idea that we've never left that perfect oneness, and the way we get to it is through the shared interest, by finding the common ground with other people and realizing we're all in the same boat, we're all fighting the same hard battle, and the battle really is just, like you say, the resistance that we put up to the idea that we could be at peace at every given moment. I could choose peace instead of this.
Yeah, and it's such a powerful thing. I want to just touch on this resistance piece, because again, this is another term or section, I should say, in the book, and it's a term in A Course in Miracles, and it's that word unwillingness, where we can easily say, I'm willing, I'm willing, I'm willing, I'm willing. But on the flip side, if nothing's shifting, if nothing's changing, well, maybe there's actually some unwillingness there to heal. Actually, I still like being Corinne. I don't, maybe just a little, I don't want to give up this whatever, whatever it may be. I just don't want to. There's benefits I'm getting out of it, or whatever that may be. And there's a part in the Course that says, I have it right here. It's on my wall. I'm going to get it.
Sure.
It's so good. It says, the Holy Spirit asks only this little help of you. Whenever your thoughts wander to a special relationship which still attracts you, enter with him into a holy instant, and there let him release you. Here's the next few sentences that are really important. He needs only your willingness to share his perspective, to give it to you completely. And your willingness need not be complete, because his is perfect. It is his task to atone for your unwillingness by his perfect faith, and it is his faith you share with him there. Out of your recognition of your unwillingness, I'm going to say that one more time. Out of your recognition of your unwillingness for your release, his perfect willingness is given you. Call upon him, for heaven is at his call, and let him call on heaven for you. I love this little quote because, and it's not so little, it's got some juicy things in there.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even, it's saying so clearly, out of your recognition of your unwillingness, his perfect willingness is given you. So there, our willingness doesn't even need to be perfect. It's just that tiny bit. And the more we can recognize where we are unwilling and take that unwillingness to Spirit is going to give us his willingness. And the last sentence, the last two sentences, call upon him, for heaven is at his call, and let him call on heaven for you. There, that word for, let him call on heaven for you. We're asked to do so little. We're really, it's the Holy Spirit's job. The Holy Spirit's job is everything, calling on heaven for us. Page 90 in FIP is that I must have decided wrongly because I'm not at peace prayer. Mm-hmm. And it ends with a sentence. I'm blanking on it. It's by allowing him to choose for God for you. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Holy Spirit chooses for God for us. We don't even have to know how to choose for God. We don't know how to choose for God. We let Holy Spirit do it for us. So I guess there's really 2 points here that I'm emphasizing, just the beauty of being able to honestly recognize our unwillingness when it shows up, that willingness to take the unwillingness to Holy Spirit. And then the second thing just to highlight is this word for, that really we're asked to do so little. We're asked to let our inner therapist, the Holy Spirit, do the healing for us. We're not asked to do Holy Spirit's job ourselves. We're asked to let Holy Spirit, do Holy Spirit's job. So I get very excited about that quote, if you can't tell.
That's a great one. As you're saying that, it occurred to me, I like mnemonic devices, and so HS for Holy Spirit also could be hydraulic system. Which is, if you think about it, if you've seen some of these, like the sci-fi superhero movies, I'm thinking of the ones where the people, humans ride around in these giant things that, and it's in real, the real world. Examples would be, if you go to these open pit mines, and they have these gigantic earth movers. It's just one guy, it's typically, or a guy or a gal, and they're moving little levers that basically are multiplied. The little effort that's there is multiplied, hundreds or maybe thousands of times in the hydraulic pressure that's then applied to moving big mounds of earth, kind of thing. But it's sort of like the same thing with us. It's just that little willingness is really the trigger that opens up the awareness to that tremendous support that we have. Everyone has it. I think that's another important thing to remember, that it's not just an exclusive thing that, for a certain elite group, that's an exclusive membership only, secret handshake kind of thing. It's, anybody who wants to tune into that awareness has that available 24/7, 365. And we just need to remember that, we all have it. And so that's another helpful thing. Yeah, years ago, that the little willingness, to me, was such an important idea, and also how that it's inevitable that we'll find that willingness. And I remember the first version I had of A Course in Miracles, I took backpacking in the High Sierra about 35 years ago or so. I remember I had I was reading it, for some of this for the first time, and I was reading about how the word inevitable is fearful to the ego, but comforting to what we really are, because we know that at some point we're going to have the abundant willingness that is talked about in this curriculum, but we have to start with a little willingness, because that then over time gets amplified, and then we become aware of the fact that it really was truly there, and the support of what we've always been as one thing, one being, is the whole cosmos, the whole universe, not on the level of form, but in the level of spirit, is there supporting us, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely so true and so beautiful. And we can trust that. I mean, it's so true, that word inevitable. I can remember when that terrified me. I thought if I aced the course, boom, I was going to be out of here. So why do the course? I was terrified. Death was one of the things that scared me. So I realized that that's what you're touching on, that inevitability piece. That was just looking at the course through my ego. The Holy Spirit, God needs teachers. It says, you have these experiences, you have these moments, but you come back, you don't look different necessarily in the outside, but you smile more. There's a shift inside, and God needs our voices, our hands, our ears, our mouths to be able to share and extend and be willing to see the truth in our brothers, because heaven is entered 2 by 2. This isn't just something, that of course we can do this work on our own, but the real practice, and this is what I've been, really growing into, is really in those relationships that challenge us every day when we step out the door and we encounter our brothers, which are, they are us, standing there, but we seeing how quickly we can push away or shut out or judge. It's through our relationships that we wake up. And so, what a beautiful thing.
And we don't even have to walk out the door. It can be someone that we live with, or someone that shows up on our phones or tablets or TVs or laptops or what. That, if there's a reaction, that's usually a good clue that we're harboring some kind of judgment or condemnation, and it's like, okay, if this is a projection of some part of myself that I haven't owned and I haven't reintegrated, that's my forgiveness classroom. And and I know there's a lot of places in your book that you bring this out. I'm okay if I read from something I've got underlined from it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I just flipped through until I found one of the places I've underlined. This is on page 82, like the third paragraph. And in here you write, "We've built blocks against love because we want to experience ourselves as separate and autonomous. Those blocks keep the ego going. And then you quote from the text in chapter 5, the ego becomes strong in strife. And then you say, we're okay with letting a little love in, but not too much. The call to love is so strong, however, that the only way to deny it is to be unwilling to heal. I think that addresses your, the topic of resistance that you touched on. And then the next paragraph says, unwilling? Yep. Sigmund Freud called this tendency the death instinct. We also know it by terms like self-destructive behavior, resistance, or self-sabotage. And it's such a profound propaganda machine that sometimes I don't think we realize how profoundly expert we become at hoodwinking ourselves and convincing ourselves that this is the real deal, because there's this body, and I can poke things through it, and I can and experience these pain things, and I can then there's experiences that happen when all these little stimuli and this very sophisticated environment happen, but we forget it's this holographic dream really that we made up. But I think it takes time to let that idea sink in, doesn't it?
It does, but it's such a compelling witness because that's its job. The job of the compelling witness of the body, of the fact if I prick my finger, when I got this quote down off my bulletin board, I have a little needle here, and I was like, ooh, I better not prick myself. The compelling witness of, stub your toe, it hurts, have a panic attack, it sucks. That is the ego's best evidence to keep you convinced that this is all there is, because it hurts, because it's that painful, and because it's so convincingly real. That is its absolute purpose. And so there becomes our work and our willingness to be willing to see it differently, to bring the Holy Spirit in. I don't know if I want to say it that way, but to call on Holy Spirit, to ask for our perception to be changed, to see it differently. In my book, I talk about, the ego dangling bait in front of you, whether it's anxiety, if that's your hook. For me, maybe it was a physical symptom, a relationship problem. It's dangling, a little bit of bait in front of you, hoping you're going to take it because it knows that is your, spot where you're most likely to take the bait. That's that super compelling witness. Just a little funny side story about that particular part in the book where I talk about, the ego dangling bait. I had it originally as the ego dangling, I think like a golden carrot in front of you, like literally like a carrot, but in gold. And my editor was like, I don't know what that is. Like, why is it a gold carrot? And I was like, I don't know either. And I realized it was from a childhood video game that I used to play, where like the gold carrots was like the thing that you wanted, that you were always constantly after. And I was like, oh, that's a video game reference from the 80s that nobody's going to get. So we can just call it.
Well, now we know. Now we know. That's actually a good metaphor, because it's glitters, as Shakespeare said, here's metal more attractive, but I think that, again, I keep coming back to, the idea that is one of the more challenging ones but actually ultimately the most fulfilling one is that there really is an identity that we think if we lose, it's going to be horrible, but it's really just the opposite. The identity that we've become so invested in because of the mileage that we think we're getting from it, and the payout or the payoff, appears to, work very well in the sense that when we have the anxiety or the outrage or the self-pity or that whole huge realm of stuff that is less than peaceful, any of those thoughts and feelings associated with them become then this self-propagating propaganda that convinces us that we're getting something out of this maladaptive dream. Mm-hmm. And we think that our own little special adaptation to this dream somehow is working until it seems like maybe it's not working quite so well. Another mutual friend, Susan Dugan, has I don't think she came up with this phrase, but she's sort of one that's reminds me of it on occasion, and that's sort of the imagining the Holy Spirit, our inner kindness teacher, our inner therapist, as you eloquently put in your book, asking us, so how's this working out for you? How's this ego strategy working out for you? And if we can just kind of remember to gently laugh at that, and in A Course in Miracles, Jesus pokes fun right and left, in the most kind-hearted possible way of lampooning the ego. That isn't really working out for us very well, is it? I mean, it's just, we have to honestly look at it. We have to really see the impeccable logic, but the complete insanity of the ego, in order for us to really begin to question, as Helen Schuckman and Bill Thetford, finally did after years of bickering and and adversarial battling. They say, there must be a better way, and I think that's I think we actually ask ourselves that over and over again, until we finally, as of course puts it, God takes the final step, and we don't need to ask it anymore. But it's an ongoing process, isn't it, to ask our inner therapist to say, hey, would you look at this with me? Would you, just kind of let's bring this to the light, turn on the Close Encounters floodlights, and watch this stuff disappear with me. Because if I try to do it myself, I'm going to be, trying to drag it into the closet, into the dark, and there's no light there, and so it's just going to be a scary monster, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. And I actually want to just go back to a few things that you said, because you made such really very important points about how invested we are in our small sense of self, or our seemingly separate self identities, and how we are afraid, of losing that, and afraid that it's all hell's going to break loose if we do that, when it's the opposite. I've had moments, just like real experiential moments of feeling like I'm touching something so much greater than this sense of self of as Corinne, that when I come out of it, it's like, why did I ever defend against this? Why did I ever defend against this? This is wonderful. And now I can go about with this, like, having had this new experience. So there's nothing to the only thing we lose is fear. Right. The only thing we lose is fear. And that's huge. And, I really like thinking about awareness as almost being like stretchy, where in these bodies, it's like our awareness and anxiety in particular, it gives us tunnel vision. It constricts our awareness. In anxiety, all you know is the anxiety. It's like, that's all, literally, when I was in those moments of panic and like really, really intense, debilitating anxiety, that was my world. That was all I was aware of. Release the anxiety a bit, and just like, we're going about our normal day, our awareness is still very constricted. It's still very constricted to the concrete, to this body, to me, everything as it relates to me. I've gained so much from reading about and learning about near-death experiences. And in particular, Anita Moorjani, her book is called Dying to Be Me. And I just heard her speak on her Hay House radio show recently. And she used this example of a tapestry, where if you're looking at a tapestry from afar, you see it in its entirety. It's beautiful. You can see how all the different patterns and shapes and colors all fit together. But if you start zeroing in, and you start to just look at one, little segment of it, and you get smaller and smaller till all you're aware of is a tiny fiber. That's like what we are experiencing right now. We have such a limited awareness that is, nowhere near the whole. We think it's the whole because we're deluding ourselves and think that, that this is all that there is. But learning from folks who've had experiences like that has been so eye-opening for me to get, a sense of just how our awareness can go, how we can always go further. If we think we've got it, it isn't it. Like, we can keep going, we can keep going beyond that. So that was just one piece I wanted to respond to. The other piece that you said, that question, is it working for you? I think that's a question we should ask ourselves, that we should check in with often, because I know for me, it took getting extremely honest with recognizing that, no, it's not working for me. I am steering my ship into the ground. I am literally like, driving. I was not, I recognized that being behind the wheel was not where I needed to be. I needed to let Holy Spirit be driving my car, so I can be relaxed in the back seat. Like we needed a serious role change there. So I think that that's a wonderful, wonderful question. And then just the other thing that I've already kind of emphasized that I just wanted to respond to is just really the extreme honesty that this work requires, how this radical honesty, which I talk about in my book, means that we're willing to be honest about where we're willing and where we're unwilling. We're willing to be honest about those judgmental thoughts that go through our mind that are too yucky to admit to anybody, yet they were there. And, we want to do the Holy Spirit's job by saying, oh, I'm going to dismiss them, or I'm going to change them and think something positive instead. Holy Spirit wants us to say, hey, I just noticed this. Here you go. And Holy Spirit gives us back. It's always that exchange. We never just give something and it just goes. There's an exchange. We get back that experience of love, that renewed sense of peace. We get back that shift. And so I really like thinking about that, in our work with Holy Spirit as it always being an exchange, because we don't lose anything. Like we said already, it's just fear that we lose.
So
and
true.
We get back everything.
Yeah, we really are exchanging nothing for everything.
Yeah.
And it's that willingness to allow that inner therapist to release us from our misperceptions really does provide such an expansive sense of identity that really, I like the one metaphor you had with the thread and the tapestry, and just looking at one thread, you don't really get the whole picture, and you might think that some of the other threads are from afar, maybe not contributing as much as they need to be,
or they're being jerks,
or whatever, But it's kind of like the whole we/they paradigm, from this little zoomed in place that we think we're in, we see an incredibly distorted picture of reality. A year or so ago, we moved to the Oregon coast, and I look out the window and see a little sliver of ocean through there, and I every time I see that, it's kind of a reminder that I still think I'm, a droplet, or maybe even just a molecule of water in this giant oceanic self that we really all are. And if I can just remember that little mental bubble, that little, imaginary border, the seemingly separate self, the small sense of self identity is just a silly, forgivable, inconsequential mistake. I love how Ken Wapnick says it's not sinful, evil, or wicked. It's just silly, and we can, more and more as we begin to look at it and take. Oops, sorry about that.
I'm dancing.
So if we can just kind of, every little thought that comes up, like, oh, that's an interruption, and I'll call them later, or whatever, and just say everything that seems to disturb our peace, whatever it might be. If we can remember, that's like as you were pointing out a few moments ago, a perfect opportunity to look at what we think is our identity, and we think that maybe that has some possibility of being threatened. Well, the ego was always threatened. Its only operating mode is anxiety, right? But that what we really are doesn't understand anxiety.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a completely foreign concept. It's like, what would that be? And that's just an astonishing difference between the two. But where we think we are is where we need to work with, and that's why so much of the curriculum is the not know curriculum of just saying, okay, I don't need to affirm what is, because what we really are is this oceanically wonderful, amazingly, profoundly great, all-inclusive, capital S self that we all are, and no one or no thing is left out.
Yeah.
But the compromise that we think we made, and it's only just a crazy fleeting thought in eternity, the tiny mad idea, is that we think that somehow we messed it up. But we do, like you say, and you point out in this book so well, and so many different angles, we can turn to this inner therapist, and whether or not we picture ourselves on a couch in Freudian fashion, or if it's just kind of, stop and catch ourselves in any thought that is not completely peaceful, and say, could I see peace instead of this? Could you help me, inner kindness teacher, inner therapist, return to that, and that leveraging factor, that hydraulic amplification kicks in at that moment, doesn't it?
That's everything. That's everything.
Yeah.
And just to go back to what you said too, about, I love how you said it. And I don't know if I got your exact words, but what we really are doesn't know anxiety or doesn't understand anxiety. I don't remember your exact words, but it was perfect. Let's let that sink in. What we really are does not know anxiety. And so that's where maybe folks will disagree with me, but that's where I just feel like a complete healing from anxiety is possible, because it's not who we are, because who we really are does not know that. Now, I could say that the construct of Corinne is an anxious construct. The small sense of self, the personality of Corinne, is definitely on the anxious side. I am learning that that's not who I am. And so therefore now my experience of that anxiety has just, diminished. I don't have the panic. I'm nowhere near anywhere where I used to be. Occasionally, maybe there's like a little residue that shows up, but it's laughable. I remember having a funny, I remember sharing this in my study group a few years ago, where I had a pang of pain in my abdomen somewhere. And I heard this whisper, this ego voice in my head go, "It's your liver." Like, and in the past, that would have been a very triggering, like fearful thought, like, oh my gosh, is something wrong with my liver? Like, what was that? And this was like, oh, haha, like, thanks, ego, but no thanks. So I was able to just laugh it away. And so that's where I feel like, it really is this learning about who we, or that's unlearning, however you want to say it, that who we really are does not know anxiety. So yay.
Mhm.
Yay for that.
And your response to that might have been, oh, I'll go make a doctor's appointment. And while you're, sitting there, having your doctor review it, you could be thinking, oh, here's there, there again, there's in any situation, no matter how we deal with anything, there's always two options. There's two teachers, and that inner therapist is always available 24/7, isn't it? I mean, because we could
Always.
just as easily in an appointment like that say, oh, on some level, I know that I'm not this self, but I'm out of an expression of kindness to myself because of my belief system, doing what I think is going to be helpful. And maybe for me, it'd be going to a doctor. Maybe for someone else, it'd be not doing. Maybe it'd be for somebody else, it'd be some alternative therapy, or just saying, I don't need this. But we know, we all know on the level of form what our belief is, and to be at peace with that oftentimes takes the expression of just doing what is the kindest thing for ourselves and everyone that we're involved with. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think that that's a way to not make a big deal out of the form, which is
Right.
really another way of looking at the level of confusion, approach that the ego has, and just saying, I'll I'll, I'll use your own game and turn the tables on it, and just say, sure, I'll do the things on the level of form, but I'll just recognize that there's really an essence, or a spirit that is my real identity, that I'm going to go with the ocean instead of the drop, and there's peace in that ocean,
Yeah.
not on the individual waves, but overall.
Right, right. And another way of saying it too, again, with that question of, do I go to the doctor? Do I not? Be where you are at. If you believe
Yeah,
you need
yeah.
to, go and do it with the Holy Spirit. If you believe
Mhm.
you don't need to, look at that with the Holy Spirit. Look at it all, withhold nothing. The Course says, hold on to nothing. So literally, we're asked to give everything, everything, everything over to the Holy Spirit. And we can let ourselves be where we are, which is the most kind thing that we can do, in doing what we feel we need to, but we can do that with Holy Spirit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Was there anything else in the book that you wanted to talk about that because we just barely got into it? I mean, I think we read a couple of paragraphs, but there's
Well, I
lots
think
in there.
we covered, even though I didn't maybe directly quote from the book, we definitely covered, a good amount. I don't have anything that's standing out to me at the
Okay.
moment, except just that this contains every step that I took to get from where I used to be, which was, and I had been diagnosed with multiple different anxiety disorders. That, I wrote about, as I found my anxiety issues falling away, I wrote about what was helping me, and the result are in the pages of that book. So that has all the steps that I took to get to where I am now, which is living happy and anxiety free and grateful. And somebody asked me, well, do you still experience fear? And I chuckled. I was like, well, I still wake up every day thinking I'm Corinne, and I still have, what I identify as an amygdala in my brain, which experiences that fight or flight. So, yes, I experience a full range of human emotions, but it's not the debilitating, overwhelming, crippling anxiety, or even the same triggers that I used to have. There's been for sure a big shift there. So that's why I'm just so excited to be able to share this work with other people. Yeah.
Very cool. So
Yeah.
so when your brain is happy, does that mean you have a merry amygdala?
Okay, this goes back. I wanted to say something earlier. Bruce has the best sense of humor, and during every Miracle Share conference, you are our comic relief, and I'm so excited. You downplayed your role in the conference this year. Bruce is part of the team, and the Miracle Share conference is going to happen. I don't have the dates off the top of my head. It's in October, right?
I think it's the 19th, 20th, and 21st. It's the
That sounds right.
third weekend in October. Friday,
that
Saturday,
sounds
Sunday.
right.
Yep,
And
yep.
so you always provide the best comic relief in the chat during the the conference. And Mary Magdala, I love that.
Well, anyway, hopefully this has been helpful to other than just the both of us, which I know we've benefited greatly from this conversation. So thank you very much, and do check out Corinne's wonderful book if you haven't already, From Anxiety to Love. I highly recommend it for both new and returning course students, and also her website, which is From Anxiety to Love.
FromAnxietyToLove.com. Surprise, surprise.
How appropriate. And then we'll be putting the Miracle Share virtual conference information online soon, and I'll put that on ACIM blog, and lots of all the other places that you'll expect to find it. Right?
Awesome. I'm so excited, and I'll just add one more thing, that the book, although it does have lots of journal prompts and exercises, there's also meditations. I'm a big fan of meditation. We got meditations throughout the book, and they actually have been made into a meditation album available on iTunes and Amazon. And I'm so excited about it. I usually don't like listening to my own recorded voice. It's just a weird thing that I think a lot of people can relate to, but I'll actually use these meditations because I love the music that they're set to so much. So I just want to mention to folks that if you're interested in downloading 3 of those tracks from the album for free, you can go to FromAnxietyToLove.com/meditations, and you can get 3 of those tracks for free. Yay!
Very cool. Very cool. All righty. Well, thanks again. I've had a very enjoyable hour talking with you, and
Me too, Bruce.
Further ones. And thanks to all the listeners who joined in, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye for now.